He walked into the courtroom with his medals gleaming on his chest, steady steps, calm gaze, a true war hero. But even there, before justice, he was treated as if he were nothing more than a fraud. Captain Donald Reese couldn't help himself. He smirked and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "And this guy says he's a general? Must have bought that uniform at a flea market." Little did he know, a single phone call would change everything. Within minutes, the game had turned. And what came next? Shocked even the most skeptical. General Elijah Matthews grew up in a poor neighborhood on the outskirts of Atlanta. Son of a cleaning lady and grandson of a World War II veteran, Elijah always heard the same phrase: "You'll have to be 3 times as good just to be treated as equal." From a young age, he showed unusual discipline. He was the first to arrive at school and the last to leave the community library. While boys his age got lost in the dangerous corners of the streets, he buried himself in books on military strategy, biographies of great leaders, and battle tactics. He dreamed of serving his country, not for glory, but to honor the grandfather he never met. At 18, he joined the army. He started at the lowest rank, facing suspicion, sideways glances, and commanders who doubted his ability just because of the color of his skin. But Elijah never backed down. He climbed one rung at a time with sweat, courage, and silence. Captain Donald Reese, on the other hand, came from a completely different lineage. Born in an upper-class suburb of Dallas, son of a retired general and grandson of a senator, Donald's grew up surrounded by privilege. At the military academy, everything came easy. He was respected before he'd ever proved anything. His arrogance grew with time, fed by inherited power and the certainty that the world revolved around his desires. When Donald first met Elijah, it was during a field leadership meeting. Elijah was already a colonel, commanding with firmness, empathy, and efficiency. Donald, however, couldn't accept that a black man had earned such respect without the shortcuts he himself had taken. That resentment grew over the years, until an internal corruption investigation in the high command put Donald in the spotlight. To his surprise, the one leading the audit committee was none other than Elijah Matthews, now promoted to general. Donald's wounded pride wouldn't let him accept the situation. He began a silent smear campaign, spreading rumors, manipulating documents, and inciting other officers to question Elijah's integrity. That's how, even as the victim, Elijah ended up being the one accused. When the day of the trial arrived, the courtroom was packed. The press covered every second. On one side, General Matthews, in uniform, calm and dignified, representing all those who had been silenced throughout history. On the other, Captain Reese, with his sarcastic smile and eyes overflowing with prejudice. And it was there, in that tense setting, that everything began to change. The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible. The murmurs of the audience fell silent when the judge opened the case. The military prosecutor, visibly uncomfortable, began reading the charges against Elijah Matthews: abuse of authority, favoritism in military contracts, misuse of funds. Elijah remained unshaken. Sitting upright, eyes steady ahead, he knew he was being used as a scapegoat. The system needed a culprit, and who better than the black general who dared to rise too high? The following days were marked by contradictory testimonies, supposedly discovered documents, and clear attempts to tarnish his reputation. Elijah found himself questioned by officers who had once applauded him. Many stayed silent, fearing repercussions. Others simply chose not to get involved, but not everyone. A young lawyer named Maya Henderson began investigating the case on her own. Maya was the daughter of a former soldier who had served with Elijah in Afghanistan. She remembered the respect her father had for him, so she decided to dig deeper. And what she found was alarming: tampered documents, deleted emails, paid-off testimonies. It all pointed to a clear pattern of sabotage. Meanwhile, Elijah wasn't just facing the courtroom. He was fighting an inner battle. Memories from his past came rushing back. The death of his younger brother in a botched police raid, the beatings he endured as a teenager, the look on his mother's face when she learned he'd been promoted to general, that pride mixed with fear. This was more than a trial. It was an entire life being put to the test. The tension hanging in Captain Donald Reese's office was far from dissipating. He never imagined that his jab at General Elijah Matthews would have such deep consequences. The wounded pride of the racist officer was turning into a desperate struggle to maintain control. But what no one could have predicted was that the truth, long buried, was about to emerge with full force. As the courtroom hearings continued, Maya Henderson, the young lawyer who had taken on Elijah's case, worked tirelessly. With each piece of evidence gathered, her commitment went beyond the professional. She felt the responsibility of representing not just her client, but all the voices silenced by injustice and prejudice. Elijah's past, full of sacrifice and challenges, began to surface in details that deeply moved everyone present. Maya revealed official documents that proved years of impeccable service by General Elijah, including life-saving missions and internal reforms that revolutionized the military system. "You are looking at a man who dedicated his life to protecting this nation, not with empty words, but with concrete actions," she declared, looking firmly at Reese, who remained silent, visibly unsettled. But the first major turning point came when an unexpected witness entered the room. Lieutenant Marcus Bennett, a former subordinate of Reese, took the stand with the courage of someone who knew it was time for the truth. He revealed that Donald Reese frequently used his position to undermine and sabotage the careers of Black officers, including Elijah, and that his accusations were nothing more than a personal vendetta. "I saw Captain Reese demote men out of pure prejudice. I saw the fear and humiliation in the eyes of those he tried to destroy. We cannot allow this injustice to continue," said Marcus, his voice steady as he looked at Reese, who began to sweat under the weight of the revelation. The second twist came when a leaked audio recording was presented. In it, Reese made derogatory and racist comments during an internal meeting, laughing with other officers about how keeping the Black general in line was the real challenge. The recording sent shock and outrage rippling through the courtroom. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. At that moment, the scales of justice began to clearly tilt in Elijah's favor. But Captain Reese, realizing his world was crumbling, tried to defend himself, claiming it was all a conspiracy to smear his reputation. He refused to admit the gravity of his actions, desperately clinging to his authority. Meanwhile, Elijah Matthews remained calm, observing everything with unshakable dignity. In his eyes, there was no room for hatred or revenge, only the strength of someone who knows the real battle is for truth and respect. He knew his fight represented more than just himself. It was a voice against the institutional racism that corroded the country's foundations. Outside the courtroom, the story was already gaining national attention. Civil rights organizations, activists, and thousands of people began to rally in support of Elijah, seeing him as a symbol of resistance against discrimination. Public pressure mounted, prompting military authorities to officially investigate Reese's behavior. However, as justice moved forward, a tightly guarded secret threatened to turn everything upside down. Maya discovered a series of documents, revealing a dark connection between Reese and a corruption scheme involving military contracts and illicit favors. This discovery not only explained Reese's animosity toward Elijah, but also showed he had much to lose if the general continued to rise. The weight of this revelation was so great that Maya had to protect her source and carefully plan how to use the information. The battle was no longer just about racism and injustice, but also about exposing a network of corruption that compromised the integrity of the military system. As the hearings continued, the atmosphere carried a mix of hope and tension. For Elijah, each moment was a step toward redemption and the recognition he deserved, but also a painful reminder that the path to justice is long and full of unexpected trials. And in the midst of this storm, one question lingered in the air. Would the truth, even as heavy and controversial as it was, be enough to bring down Captain Reese and restore General Matthews' honor? Or would the system still protect those who prefer silence over justice? The atmosphere in the courtroom had reached an almost unbearable level. Every word, every glance carried the tension of a historic moment, not just for Elijah Matthews and Captain Donald Reese, but for the entire institution that had long pretended to ignore the weight of prejudice and corruption. Elijah stood there, firm, his body strong, but his face reflected a mixture of exhaustion and determination. He knew this battle would be decisive not only for his career, but for his legacy and for those who still faced injustice disguised as military formality. He wasn't seeking revenge, he was seeking justice, and that was his strength. As Maya Henderson presented the last and most crucial piece of evidence, the secret documents linking Reese to the corruption scheme, the captain began to lose control. His once arrogant words now sounded desperate, his hands trembled, and the cold, impenetrable mask began to fall. "You have no concrete evidence," he tried to argue, but his voice faltered. "This is a setup, a trap." But the documents spoke for themselves. Inflated contracts, bribes, secret bank accounts, and at the center of it all, Reese's dirty hand trying to protect his empire. The courtroom exploded in murmurs and incredulous glances. For many there, the truth felt like a violent blow to the face of impunity. The judge, an elderly man with years of experience in military justice, called for silence. His deep, firm voice rang out like a gavel. "The facts presented are serious and demand immediate investigation. This court stands at a historic crossroads." At that moment, Maya made a dramatic pause and looked directly at Reese. "Captain Donald Reese, you tried to tarnish General Elijah Matthews' honor with slander and prejudice. But justice does not bow to racism, corruption, or fear. Today, the truth will prevail." Elijah felt his heart race, not from anxiety, but from a hope that had long been extinguished. He thought of all the hard moments, the inner battles against prejudice, the closed doors he had to force open. Each scar was a symbol of resistance. As the court prepared for the final deliberation, a heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of papers being shuffled and firm footsteps. Outside, in the streets, thousands followed every detail through live broadcasts. The case had become a national symbol in the fight against institutional racism. Support groups organized peaceful demonstrations, calling for deep change. But, in that crucial moment, something unexpected happened. Reese received a mysterious call, a brief conversation, but one that changed his entire demeanor. His face, once filled with arrogance, now twisted in panic. When he returned to the hearing, he refused to speak further. He remained silent, like someone who realized they had lost the battle before it even ended. Finally, the judge delivered the sentence. Considering the evidence presented, this court orders the immediate suspension of Captain Donald Reese from his duties, pending the completion of the investigation into allegations of corruption and racist conduct. The impact was like an explosion. Reese, defeated, left the courtroom escorted by officers, while Elijah received quiet, respectful applause from those who recognized that this victory belonged to everyone. But the emotional climax wasn't just injustice being served. Elijah, in that moment, allowed himself to look at Maya and those who had supported him. He saw in his family's silent tears, in the bright eyes of friends, and in the faces of those who had never had a voice, the true victory. And then came the moment of personal redemption. In an emotional testimony, Elijah spoke to the court and to the nation. "I'm not here to fuel hatred. I'm here to show that human dignity cannot be trampled by prejudice, that hard work, integrity, and courage can win, even when everything seems lost. My fight is for a future where no one else has to go through what I went through." Those words echoed beyond the courtroom walls, inspiring a new generation not to accept silence in the face of injustice. But not everything was resolved. The investigation against Reese was just beginning, and the corruption network promised to bring down many others. Elijah knew this was only the first victory in a long war, and that's when he made a decision that shocked many. Instead of demanding severe punishment and revenge, he proposed a reform program for the military, focused on diversity, inclusion, and transparency, with Maya leading the commission. It was a leadership gesture that showed the true greatness of the general, turning pain into positive action, breaking down walls built by ignorance, and building bridges to a better future. The court had decided, but the true journey of Elijah Matthews was far from over. The impact of his victory echoed not only through institutions, but in the hearts of thousands of people who saw in that story a spark of hope for their own struggles. Right after the sentence, Elijah did not let himself be carried away by fleeting glory. He knew his role was greater, not just to ensure his personal and professional dignity, but to open paths so no one else would have to go through what he went through. In the following weeks, the general and Maya Henderson, now appointed head of the Military Reform Commission, worked tirelessly to draft a plan that would revolutionize the Army's culture. They created strict protocols against racism, racial awareness training programs for officers, and a completely transparent reporting system protected from retaliation. The first meetings were intense, with many officers resistant to change, afraid of losing privileges and the status quo. But Elijah didn't flinch. He used his story, his scars, his victories to inspire even the most skeptical. At the same time, Captain Donald Reese faced his consequences, not only suspension but investigations that would eventually expose him publicly, costing him everything he had built on lies and racism. To many, Reese became the symbol of what the military needed to overcome, a living reminder of the dark past finally being confronted. But the most important thing during that turbulent time was the transformation movement that Elijah helped spark. Young Black officers began to receive opportunities previously denied. Mentorship and inclusion programs became part of the military routine. The voices of the excluded finally gained space. Among the remarkable moments of that process, there was one episode that went viral on social media. Elijah, at an official ceremony, when asked about his humble background and the racism he faced, responded with humility and strength. "I am living proof that courage can open doors that ignorance insisted on closing, that every battle, no matter how hard it seems, has a greater purpose, that together we can build an institution that not only defends the country, but defends the respect and dignity of every citizen." That statement echoed in classrooms, in conversation circles, inspiring not just military personnel, but civilians, young people, and children who saw in the general a figure of resistance and hope. On the other hand, Elijah's family also found strength to heal old wounds. His wife, who had once suffered in silence seeing her husband victimized by discrimination, now shared the genuine pride of that man who, against all odds, changed not just his life, but the lives of many. His children grew up seeing their father's example, learning the importance of justice, empathy, and the constant fight against inequality. Meanwhile, Maya Henderson remained by Elijah's side, not just as a lawyer, but as a friend, confidant, and partner in the mission of social transformation. They formed an unstoppable duo, balancing justice with compassion, strategy with humanity. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The road to change is long and full of obstacles. They faced threats, sabotage attempts, harsh criticism, even from within the army itself. Yet Elijah and Maya's determination was unshakable. They knew that each step forward was a victory against the silence of prejudice and injustice. In the end, the story of General Elijah Matthews became more than a courtroom case. It became a national symbol of resistance, transformation, and hope. For those who followed this journey, one powerful lesson remains. Racism, prejudice, and corruption only prevail as long as they are ignored and tolerated. But when courage meets truth, when justice is stronger than fear, change becomes inevitable. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos with stories that inspire and transform. And there's a brand new video appearing on the screen that you have to watch. It will move you just as much as this one. See you in the next video, where we'll bring more stories of overcoming, justice, and fighting for what's right. Thanks for being here with me.